Welcome to the Solid Verbal. And now, Dan and Ty.
Dan Rubenstein, let's do it. Let's talk Oklahoma.
I would love to talk
I want to talk some Oklahoma football today with you, with our friend Eddie Radosevich from over at Sooner Scoop. We had Eddie on back in 2023. It was a lively conversation about where the Sooners were at. Things have changed since then, at least in some regard. We will go into that and much, much more. I'm excited to continue whatever we're calling this series. I don't think we ever really came up with the name for it, but let's just get a vibe check on Oklahoma, man.
I am thrilled to take a vibe check on Oklahoma because they have been fascinating under Brent Venables. There have been incredible highs, especially even last year, like destroying Alabama, altering the complexion of the college football playoff. I mean, you could argue Vanderbilt, you could argue Oklahoma, whatever, in the way that they did, that joining the SEC and then negatively affecting the perception of the SEC via playoff at-large bids in year one, recruiting like they have. They've, I think, arguably the best tackle duo incoming 2025 class. I think the number one, Michael Fasusi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Bringing in arguably the best transfer portal quarterback in John Mateer. I mean, Carson Beck, I'm sure. Nico, I'm sure, they have some arguments here, of course, but one of the more high profile, certainly. They're fascinating. And I hope, for the sake of my own personal pleasure, that they're playing in closer games, winning games, entertaining games more often than they were last season. That was a tough Red River watch, Ty. It was. Oh yeah. It's just not fun when Oklahoma isn't just hanging with the big boys or beating the big boys. So I'm excited to learn more, to talk more, and to pick Eddie's brain. Hey, real quick, it'd be great if you could consider subscribing to the YouTube channel down below. It really helps us out.
Yeah, I think we've already established that we're material girls here on this show. We're into the John Mateer transfer. We're excited to see what he brings with him to Norman, but it's not just him. It's Jaydn. It's Ben Arbuckle, who comes down with Mateer from Wazoo. There were some other hires, I think, of note that maybe we can get into with Eddie. Notably, they hired a GM, Jim Nagy, formerly the executive director of the Senior Bowl. Also, notably, had that opinion that floated around on social media, the one that caused the take quake. I think you know which one I mean, that there should be more SEC teams in the playoff because they have more NFL draft prospects.
Right. I remember there was a certain discourse. I don't remember it was Nagy. I don't remember who it was specifically.
That was Jim Nagy.
Well, was it? But what I'm about to say is I think it was Todd McShay, but maybe I'm attributing this incorrectly, that NFL scouts should have an ability to weigh in on who is in the college football playoff based on their experience evaluating talent. If it wasn't Todd McShay, I apologize profusely. It was somebody that sort of has dipped toes into both worlds that was like, guys, let's lean on these random outside experts to determine the competitive balance of a different sport. Yeah.
It was a holiday on social media, to say the least. Anyway, this is getting a little too far afield.
Of course.
We are excited to talk Oklahoma with our friend Eddie. It's been too long, so good to get his insight, and we'll figure out what the vibes are in and around the Oklahoma football program. If you are new here, you can do us a solid, do yourself a solid if you like college football, by hitting follow, hitting subscribe. It's free to do. You get our 2 episodes every week from now until the start of the season. If you find yourself in the rarefied air of being a super verballer, or you want to further support what Dan and I do, you can get, I should add, all these episodes for free, or early, ad-free, bonus content, Discord access, a whole slew of other perks. Just be tied in a little bit more tightly with our community out at verballers.com. That is our Patreon. Won't say anything more about it, but if you're interested, go and check that out, Dan.
Absolutely. It's a no-brainer.
Without further ado, let's jump right in. It is our friend from Soonerscoop.com, Eddie Radosevich. Eddie, welcome back.
Gentlemen, I'm doing well. A lot of tension around these parts with Oklahoma City being down 0-1 right now in the series. But spring football went pretty well, so you fans are kind of the hype's building and creating and back into the back end of August. So softball carries everybody around these parts of this time of the year. So
it's a long series. It's a long series. There's a lot of good players. We're casing Wallace heads over here on the Solid Verbal. We're good to go.
Absolutely.
Ty's never heard that name in his life.
Never.
It was scary.
Tough. Okay.
Wonderful. Well, hey, welcome back. I know you're fresh off a trip to Mexico. Maybe we can get into that a little bit later because, these conversations here on our show, they tend to veer into that territory. But I did put out on our Discord and Patreon that you were stopping by, take some questions from the Verballerhood people who were interested in just knowing a little bit more about Oklahoma, and got a bunch of questions about Brent Venables. Yeah. So bear in mind, I asked this question not trying to be disrespectful. That is not my intention. But we had a bunch of questions centered around this whole idea of, hey, is Brent Venables actually getting better at this or not? What is your take on Brent Venables, coach at Oklahoma? Where is he at in sort of his evolution?
Unbelievable coach. I think that goes without saying, everything that he's done on the defensive side of the football, and just what you look at what Oklahoma's done on their defensive side of the football since he's taken over. It's incredible. It's kind of a remarkable turnaround in what they've been able to accomplish. Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman getting drafted this past draft about a couple weeks ago. It's been incredible, but obviously what on the field has been awful. And 6-7 around here for 1 year, let alone 2 of the last 3 years, usually puts coach on the hot seat. And I think that, the hire of Jim Nagy into the front office has certainly kind of been the key shifting point in everything that Brent Venables has done, or what he's been, I think, kind of uncomfortable to do. And as they make this move into the front office, it's almost kind of given everybody a little bit of I don't want to say a second life, but certainly maybe a little bit more runway than people thought they were going to have going into this 2025 season, and knowing how important it is for Brent and this staff. So you go out, you get Ben Arbuckle, obviously the promotion of Seth Luttrell. It was awful. I mean, it was one of the worst offenses that Oklahoma's put on a football field in the modern era of the program. And, to get Ben Arbuckle, then they get John Mateer, then they get Jaydn with the help of Jim Nagy. That was kind of Jim Nagy's first big home run get for Oklahoma in the portal. It feels different around here. And for a team that's coming off of a 6-7 season, again, another disappointing season and an incredibly disappointing first run in the SEC, that there had been so much hype built up around it. It's kind of weird to say that there's a lot of positive momentum. I think that, like, we sit around here at the Sooner Scoop offices and kind of joke, like, things are going too well right now. And obviously they're not playing any games, so maybe that's a part of it. But it does seem like Brent's getting things down. He's learning from past experiences and maybe getting out of his way a little bit. And with that said, naming himself the defense coordinator. I remember talking to some of the players back during the spring, right after it all went down with Zach Alley after the bowl game in January. And, or I guess it would have been December. And, I think a lot of them were just kind of like, yeah, he's been the defense coordinator for a long time. And that's probably why Zach Alley is now in Morgantown. So, I do think he's getting better, but at the same time, he's going to be judged on what they do 13 times this fall. And obviously, if it's not, anywhere in terms of progression, moving in the right direction, then I think there are going to have to be some tough decisions made by the administration and the Board of Regents. But for right now, for a guy that's coming off of 2 6-7 seasons with a 10-win season in between, things are going pretty damn well for Brent.
You gave me a perfect segue, because one of the things that I have noticed just from, personally following Marcus Freeman and his evolution, and I guess this is true of a lot of new coaches, first-time coaches, certainly the more successful ones, but it does seem as if there is a specific moment, a turning point of sorts, where they just sort of decide to be fully cutthroat, And I think that happened last offseason for Freeman. My question was actually going to be, even before you mentioned what you just said, do you think we are seeing that shift now with how Brent Venables has handled this offseason?
I think a little bit. And, I would probably just point to the hire of Ben Arbuckle, because I think that was not an unusual move by any means, because he was so well respected in what he had been able to do at Washington State, and going all the way back to Cam Ward, and obviously John Mateer's progression last year in Pullman. I think it was kind of one of those hires that was like, damn, okay, that's something that I didn't see coming, just in terms of him stepping out of the comfort zone a little bit. There's a lot of former Oklahoma players on staff. There was a lot of holdovers on the offensive side of the football. And, I think for the most part now, Bill Beatenbow and DeMarco Murray, Joe John Finley, those are the only 3 guys that, were really a part of that other portion of the program when Brent took over. So, I think so. There might also be just a realization that shit's got to change, or he's probably not going to have a job in a couple years. So, I like what they've been able to do, just being around Ben Arbuckle a couple times this spring and hearing the players talk about him, hearing how the Oklahoma offense has made progressions with John Mateer. It seems like that's a really comfortable setting for all of those guys, and especially being able to come in and usher in a new offense, have those guys kind of as a coach on the field with Mateer, and then obviously Ben Arbuckle being a younger guy, I think has really kind of ingratiated himself with the current players. And it's going to be really interesting to see what they can be offensively, because I think there's a lot of people that think they're going to be pretty damn good defensively this year. And if they can just be moderately better offensively, I think that they'd probably have a couple more wins than they had last year. And obviously a couple of the embarrassing losses that they had, particularly the one up in Columbia where you up 7 and then you lose by 7 in regulation, which is still incredible to me.
What do you expect the offense to look like? How much is it a Brent Venables vision that Arbuckle is executing? Obviously John Mateer comes in. I think he rushed for 1,000 yards. He threw, 30 or so touchdown passes. He was efficient. It wasn't a huge downfield offense, and I don't even know if Oklahoma has the pieces to be a huge downfield offense. What is like a clearly more successful offense to you, given this new personnel grouping?
Yeah, this is, I think it's basically been, hey, Ben Arbuckle, no pressure. I know you're 29 years old, but here's the keys. And basically my tenure at Oklahoma, this thing better. And, I think that last year, because of the moves that they made with Seth Luttrell, he put himself in a position when he had to make an interim hire with Joe John Finley for the back end of the season, that I do think that Brent kind of meddled within the offense a little bit. And he's a defensive guy. Right. And I think that Ben Arbuckle has been able to come in from day one and said, this is our offense. This is what we're going to do. And I think there's a lot of excitement around it. It's a completely brand new offense when you look at some of the pieces that are in place. Jalil Farouk, Nick Anderson are gone. J.J. Hester's gone. Devon Mitchell at tight end, who was a former 5-star, is now at Louisville. Gavin Sawchuk just went to Florida State. There's going to be a ton of new faces, but the guys that they did go out and get, it's going to be really kind of exciting. And I think that John Mateer, definitely not making the comparison to Baker Mayfield. I know it's kind of cliche, it's kind of easy, but he does have that personality off the field that reminds a lot of us of Baker. And I think it probably has a little bit to do with him growing up down in Texas, in Little Elm, kind of, I guess, similarity, not similar to Austin, but You get the idea. And I think that the dude's just a winner. It's going to be kind of fun to see the pieces that they put around him, going out and getting Jaydn, who was a guy that even before the portal opened, there were people that were, kind of indicating that they're going to go try to get a home run guy. And that's something that Oklahoma hasn't had in the backfield in a while, which is really kind of surprising, especially after Gavin Sawchuk and Javonte Barnes burst onto the scene 2 years ago in Brent's first year in the Cheez-It Bowl. Both had 100-yard games down there against Florida State, who obviously turned it around the next year. It will be kind of fun, but the wide receiver unit was as injured and just maligned as you could possibly be last year. They were basically down their top 7 wide receivers. It added to the problems that Jackson Arnold had in connecting with some of those guys early in the season. And it kind of led to an offense that obviously lost confidence within a quarterback when he got benched. And, kind of the rest was history. So I think more than anything, it's just a brand new blank slate for a bunch of guys. And, I think that because of some of those injuries a year ago, wide receiver, you had to play a bunch of true freshmen. And I know they're excited about Zion Kearney. Last year, you probably wouldn't know it because of his numbers, but I think that they are hoping that you look back on that freshman experience and say, well, it sucked to go through that, but because you got that experience, you were a better player in your second season in Norman. So they did go out. They were very active in the portal. Giovanni Gibson was a guy that was kind of under the radar. They brought him in from Arkansas Pine Bluff. He actually broke his foot in the third to last practice of spring, and he was having an unbelievable camp. Isaiah Satania is coming in from Arkansas. It's going to be kind of fun to see him be a downfield threat for Oklahoma. He did a little bit of that, and he brings some SEC experience. And even a guy like Keontez Lewis, he's a veteran guy coming in from Southern Illinois that Oklahoma really hopes that they kind of took a different approach. Instead of going out and spending $2-3 million in the portal on one wide receiver. They tried to get a couple of the guys that they felt like they had evaluated really well are going to be able to come in and help an offense that was just extremely miserable. So to answer your question, I mean, the bar is set so low for Oklahoma to just be better offensively that, they really don't have to do much. I think that they're headed in the right direction. It's gonna help that they have a much better offensive line though this season.
For your consideration on any podcast player, search Solid Verbal, find us and hit follow or subscribe. It's just that easy.
Eddie, it's been well established that the offense last year was not up to par. I think I think that's putting it mildly.
Sure.
If you are making a pie chart of blame for that last season, what gets the biggest slice? Because you got options, right? You've got a line that wasn't very good. You got the injuries, as you mentioned, out wide. Seth Luttrell, maybe not the best hire. Jackson Arnold, we haven't mentioned him at all, but he was kind of broken at spots throughout the course of last season. How would you kind of divvy up the blame with respect to what we saw last season?
It's probably like one of those things that's like 15%, 15%, 15%, 15%, 15%, and add it all the way up because it starts with when Jeff Lebby took the Mississippi State job and they elevate Seth Luttrell. I remember thinking back at this time last year, or I guess a couple months ago when they were going through spring, and I think everybody kind of felt like, okay, they're just going to pick up where they left off. Jackson Arnold, he didn't play well in the Alamo Bowl, but he's a 5-star. I saw the kid play, 5-6 times in high school down at Denton Guyer. I thought he was going to be incredible. But you go back to the spring, and they never really had a quarterbacks coach. And for a true freshman, basically, and that's what he was. I know he wasn't a true freshman, but he had no coach in there. They had nobody to really kind of lean on just in terms of development. And then when, S hit the fan, I think that everything kind of skyrocketed and you had the injuries. And then you had a freshman quarterback that completely lost all of his confidence within those first 4 or 5 games. So I put a little bit at Brent's plate. You obviously put some at the players' plate. Jackson Arnold did not play well, and especially in big moments. I think the Tennessee game was kind of the breaking point for a lot of people. Obviously the coaching staff, they sat him, and then Michael Hawkins Jr. ended up starting down at Auburn. But, the players certainly had a part of it. I would say that play calling just in general with Seth Luttrell, it just didn't work out. It was not good. He was trying to blend a little bit of his offense with what they were doing with Jeff Lebby. Because if you remember when they made the hire and the promotion of Seth Luttrell, the one word that kept coming up was continuity. We want to keep everything just about the same from what it was. And obviously, I think there was a lot of people around here that remember what Seth Luttrell was able to do with Mason Fine down at North Texas. And I think a lot of us just thought, okay, yeah, that's good. That's going to work out. You have a great quarterback. He's going to have a great future at Oklahoma. The way people were talking about Jackson Arnold would have made you think he was going to be, and I'm part of the problem. I thought he was going to be one of the next great generational quarterbacks at Oklahoma. That certainly didn't happen. So it was a lot of little things that kind of added up into a volcano that kind of led Oklahoma to where they were at that point last year. Just miserable. Was
there something about, like, if you're going to hold Brent Venables accountable, you mentioned that sort of he had a vision for the offense a little bit going in. You deal with all these things happening at the same time, whether it's injuries, whether it's perhaps a slight misevaluation of Jackson Arnold and juggling the Dillon Gabriel situation. And I know Dillon Gabriel has talked about that he was just sort of ready to move on to the next chapter of his life. Yeah. So I don't know how much could have been done there. But in terms of roster construction, you've talked about how like there's new added pop to this offense via the transfers, via the youth, whatever. It's just still very strange to me that we're in this place talking about Oklahoma and we're not talking about an obviously stacked, proven receivers room or running backs room or next quarterback up. And like we are with Mateer a little bit because he's the most proven of this group. What has happened in terms of roster construction, if anything, that we can say Brent Venables took a left where he should have made a right?
Yeah, it hasn't been good. And I think that a lot of it kind of falls, let's use the running back room as an example. I think that, and we probably should be using the tight end room, but there's just not a whole lot to talk about. You talk about Clerjon Finley in Norman, Oklahoma right now. People basically say, why hasn't he been fired yet?
Right. And he's like that. He's an OU guy, right? Like Seth Littrell is an OU guy, and that might cloud things sometimes. Yeah.
And DeMarco Murray for the same extent.
Yeah.
I think that, and if he wasn't DeMarco Murray, which I do think that you make some money on that on the recruiting trail and people are familiar with the name, there hasn't been a whole lot of development. And I think that, Javante Barnes is a great example. Gavin Sawchuk is a great example last year. They had injuries, sure, but there's also times where you look up and they're healthy and they're not on the field and they're not getting carries. So it's been really strange. Like the development, I think, is from a running back position. I think the best running back that Oklahoma's had here over the last couple of years is Eric Gray, and they didn't even recruit him out of high school. He came in from Tennessee. So Jaydn Ott's going to be really, really fascinating because I think that, he's basically your starter in the backfield from day one. They have a kid in Xavier Robinson who got some carries last year as a freshman. He's a local product up out of Midwest City, just about 25 minutes up the road. That's a really good backfield on paper. And if they can just get some development from those guys, which kind of falls at the feet of DeMarco, you look at the wide receiver unit. Nick Anderson was beat up all year last year. Jalil Farouk, same kind of situation. He ran into the injury bug. Any of the guys that you talk about the wide receiver position when they were injured. But the freshmen, Zion Kearney of the world, they have to take that next step. Ivan Carrion's another one of those guys. Zion Raggins is another one of those guys that played last year that, the pressure is really kind of on that coaching staff, especially on the offensive side of the football, to get some development, get guys that can, be some tools that Ben Arbuckle and John Mateer can use. Because I think that if you look at what Ben Arbuckle's been able to do, he's going to get the ball to the talent. And if you can just start there and you have a quarterback that has super accurate arm, like John Mateer does, I think that all of a sudden you're going to look at an offense that was miserable a year ago that really takes a massive step this next season just by simply by executing the offense. And a lot of times last year with an offensive line that Oklahoma threw out there, which was kind of irregular under Bill Bedenbaugh. For the most part, I think he's notoriously known as one of the better offensive lineman coaches in the country.
Yeah.
You should be in better shape. Last year, there were times where Jackson or Michael Hawkins would catch the ball and the play was over within a second and a half because nobody was blocking up front.
What in terms of what you're seeing, what you're hearing internally, how are vibes, right? Is there a sense of positivity that like we love Coach Venables, right? The offensive line loves this. The safeties love this. Is there, fellowship, brotherhood, good vibe? Like, You can say that like we're bringing in these running backs and these transfers, but if only half the team wants to be there and is enthusiastic about playing for the Sooners, you're still not going to get past 6 and 7. Do the vibes seem manageable?
That's what's made these last 3 years so kind of confusing to a certain extent, because I think that you can make the argument from a culture perspective, from a program perspective, from a top to bottom within the coaching staff to the players to the lowest guy on the roster. It seems like this is maybe one of the better cultures Oklahoma's had in a long time. And that's even going through some of the years where they were extremely good and playing in college football playoffs and things like that. So everything off the field has been excellent. And, I think that, one of the things you probably would point out if you were on the coaching staff, or Brent Venables would point out, is the development of young men and, no trouble off the field and things like that, it kind of snuck into the program a little bit under Lincoln that, were handled. It wasn't anything major, but at the same time, there hasn't been any of that. And, I think that like the offseason has been one of those times when you cover Oklahoma, it's like, you just kind of expect somebody's going to get a DUI or somebody's going to, get into a fight on a campus corner. Stuff like that happens on a college campus in the summer. But there's been really none of that. And I think that that's what makes it so tough when you talk about Brent Venables and the future of what's to come for Oklahoma. Is it's purely about on-field performance. And everybody loves Brent. He, when he returned and the welcome that he got at the airport that made national headlines and kind of a rejuvenation of the program after Lincoln left to go out to Los Angeles, it felt like, everybody wants Brent to succeed around here. But at the same time, when you throw out another 6 and 7 and you go down to the Cotton Bowl and you get embarrassed to Texas again, and on top of Texas now playing in 2 consecutive college football semifinals, and then the embarrassment that comes with the SEC, it makes 2025 extremely important for this program moving forward. And, I think that there are some good vibes within the program. As I told you guys earlier, like almost kind of strangely positive, even more positive than it probably needs to be, because you are coming off of what you are the last 3 years. So everything like that's great, which makes it even more kind of confusing and hard to have the Brent Venables conversation if they have to get to that point at the end of the season.
I think, it's an easy transition because, I think everybody needs to take care of their own house before looking around the neighborhood. You're in a new neighborhood as an Oklahoma person. And obviously, offense has been the name of the game in terms of remodeling and upgrading. When you look around the SEC, when you look at this year's schedule, when you get a sense for not just Texas, but obviously Texas measures itself against Oklahoma and vice versa, what sense do you get when you measure up where Oklahoma is in every facet, in roster construction, in coaching staff, in environment? This is post first year in the SEC. Oklahoma always stacked up well against the Big 12. Where is the stack right now with Oklahoma and the SEC?
I think it has the passion to get there, but I do think that, with everything that built up over the 3 years that led up into Oklahoma formally making the, debut, I guess, in the SEC, I think there was a lot of people around here that thought that, Oklahoma was going to just step in and be able to compete like they had in the Big 12. And to a certain extent, I think Oklahoma became a kind of a victim of their own success in a way. I think a lot of people within the athletic department, within the coach or within the football offices, had just kind of become used to this idea that they were going to be able to, I don't want to say just show up and win, but that's certainly what they did for a good 2 decades in the Big 12. And
show up and belong, right?
Yeah. And I think last year was a little bit of an eye opener in terms of when you go down to Auburn, and Auburn hasn't had a ton of success. It feels like they're headed in the right direction under Hugh Freeze. Makes it kind of interesting with the Jackson Arnold situation down there now, with them coming to Norman next year. But I think even like one of those trips was kind of an eye opener, and okay, this is really kind of different. And it was something that Oklahoma fans, I kind of mocked to a certain extent of, it just means more. These people, they're flat out crazy. And I think that Oklahoma fans, they feel like they're on par with that. But at the same time, I do think that there are things that Oklahoma probably has had to look in the mirror a little bit, have some of those tough conversations. And, at the end of the day, I think it's all headed in the right direction. It's going to just be tough when you look at the 2025 football schedule, and, any type of metric that you put on it, it's going to be one of the toughest one of the toughest schedules in the country. And especially when you throw in Michigan in week 2. So it's super, super interesting right now within the Oklahoma football program, because you do talk about the culture, you do talk about the positivity on the offensive side of the football, meeting what people believe to be another really good defense under Brent. And Oklahoma's kind of become that sexy school of, they weren't very good a year ago, maybe they make this major jump. There's pathways to see that. But I feel like we were kind of in that same situation a year ago and talking about, Jackson and Oklahoma, they could surprise some people in the SEC, and then they fell kind of flat on their face. So there's a lot of people that like the momentum, like the positivity, but we're going to need to be able to see it come September. And I think you'll probably find out rather quickly if Oklahoma can take that next step, and especially in week 2 against Michigan.
What is the bar that you feel Oklahoma needs to clear to ward off a fan mutiny?
It's real. That's a $1 million question. I would say probably somewhere around 9 wins is tough. I would say 8 wins, probably everybody feels safe. If you're having around that 7-6, 6-7 again, you're going to have just really, really incredibly tough questions to ask.
Yeah. What about Oklahoma fans? Do they feel like the move to the SEC was worth it?
I think for the most part, yeah. Because I think that when you turn on the television and anything everybody wants to talk about is the Southeastern Conference, then when you talk about the fan base that just wants to be able to show up to work on Monday and talking about, Oklahoma kicked the hell out of whoever over the weekend, then I think that there's some of the Oklahoma fan base, particularly on the message boards, that are rather vocal, that would have preferred to stay in the Big 12. But at the end of the day, when you look at where the college football is headed as a whole, you want to be in the big boys club. And I think that it's probably for the long term better for Oklahoma as a program to have made that move, learn some of the tough lessons that they did a year ago, and really kind of have to answer the questions that you probably didn't have to answer, because winning cures all. And they were able to win at such a high level, and particularly over the last 10, 15 years, have the success that they did, particularly on the offensive side of the football, that I think that they just kind of were put off because Oklahoma was winning football games and everybody felt so comfortable about being in the Big 12. So to answer your question, I think for the most part,
right,
when you look at the schedule, as tough as it is, but LSU's coming to town, and you're going to Alabama. Alabama came to town last year. You're going back out to Knoxville, where Oklahoma was in 2015. It's exciting. I mean, it not to just completely bash the Big 12, but it's certainly more exciting than a trip up to Ames or wherever.
Were there any, let's say, notable developments, standout performances, anything of that nature from guys this spring that really caught your attention that we should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, Giovanni Gibson really was making a lot of noise. And he was a guy that I think when you look at the measurables, about 6'3", 190-ish, he was a guy that I think that they kind of felt like they found a diamond under the rough. And it was really kind of a gut punch, and especially at that wide receiver position that we talked about that had so many injuries a year ago, thinking, oh boy, here we go again. I think they feel like he could come back maybe by October, maybe by OU Texas weekend, the second weekend of October. I think that's probably best case scenario. He had made some waves. Obviously, John Mateer, the way that he stepped in, made some waves. But when you look at the defensive side of the ball, I think that you kind of start with Kendall Daniels coming in from Oklahoma State, kind of a perfect cheetah for what they want to be able to do. His versatility and being able to play safety or come down and cover guys in the slot, I think is going to be kind of fun to watch. I know that when we talked to Wes Goodwin, who came over from Clemson and coached Isaiah Simmons alongside Brent at Clemson, they're really, really excited about what he's been able to do in the defense. Danny Okoye is a guy that was actually kind of a fun story. He was a homeschool kid out of the Tulsa area, was extremely highly ranked, needed to develop a year ago. They feel like he could take a big step this season. And, I think you look at the safety group, Michael Boganowski, Reggie Powers, both guys that they're having to obviously fill the place of Billy Bowman. They're really excited about both those guys. And I think that when you look at the defensive side of the ball, it's kind of amazing that everything has just flipped on a 180 basically from where they were with Lincoln and defensively and obviously generational offenses versus where they are now with just trying to get a good offense and a defense they feel like could really kind of carry them to some major wins next season. So it's kind of fun to see what this thing's going to be because there are so many questions. But when you talk about the defensive side of the ball, they, for the first time, it feels like in a while, have some actual foundation that they've built here over the first 3 years. And there's a lot of guys within the system that are looking to make that jump that a lot of players make in that third year under Brent Venables. So very excited about the defense to see what it is, despite losing some key contributors from a year ago with Stutzman and Bowman and Woody Washington. Ethan Downs was a really productive player for them on at defensive end as well. So it's kind of night and day difference. And, Jaydn Jackson, obviously, as the true freshman last year, what he was able to do was really, really exciting. And then the whole David Stone drama, a kid that came in with him from IMG, getting
what happened there, by the way?
Just craziness. And 2025 college football. I think that it was a situation that he had some people in his corner that wanted him to, for the most part, he's basically taken a pay cut by coming back to Oklahoma. And I think that they built in some things like, if you take these steps, you're going to be back to where you are in NIL compensation. Right. And I think that, David, certainly, I remember it happened on a Friday night and we had some people that had talked to people in his camp and he was in tears about, just the flat out decision to enter the portal. And then it all kind of culminates on a Sunday night, 48 hours later, basically. So there's still excitement about him. And, sure. I think what Todd Bates has been able to do with the defensive line, it's kind of remarkable. It's kind of gone quietly that he's been able to build a defensive line unit that has some dudes on it that, for the most part, and especially on the back end of that Lincoln Riley era in Norman, defense was just such an optional shrug your shoulders thing that they didn't really have a defensive tackle that you could point to and say, yeah, that's a guy. Now you at least have 3 or 4 guys on the interior, as well as, the guys on the outside, and obviously getting our Mason Thomas back. Right. There's a lot of people that think he could be one of the premier pass rushers in the country this year. So a lot of excitement on that side of the football.
When you look at Oklahoma's schedule this year, and you look at perhaps the thing that did actually ail the defense last year, if you're going to nitpick, it's they did give up some big passes, right? The explosive passing plays, as good as the pass rush was, and they were a wall against the run. They were terrific against the run last season. When you look at this year's schedule, there's not an obviously deep roster of definitely strong quarterbacks that we know of. We'll see with Bo Prabula. We'll see with Arch Manning. We'll see with whoever Michigan trots out in week 2. We'll see how Jackson Arnold at Auburn works out. Is there hope that this should be a secondary and pass rush that works in concert together better than where they were last season?
Yeah, I think so. And, when you talk about the cornerback position, I think a lot of people going into the spring were going to be kind of interested when the portal opened, if they were going to be active with any cornerbacks from the portal. And there were guys in there, but I think that there were also guys that had a couple years left. There was nobody that could come in, give you a year, and then move out, because they do feel extremely excited about some of the young kids in the secondary, and particularly at the quarterback position. Cortland Guillory was a kid that came in as a true freshman that made some waves during the spring. Eli Bowen, Peyton Bowen's brother, one of the other safeties. Eli started as a freshman last year at cornerback. They feel like he could have a really, really nice career at Oklahoma. A guy in Gentry Williams, measurable wise, when you look at him out on the football field, he could be a draftable guy. Not necessarily a first rounder or maybe even a day 2 guy, but I think he would definitely be somebody that could get drafted because of his measurables. There's always been a lot of hype around him. He hasn't been able to stay on the field. It's like, yeah, you would love to have him out there, but you can't just trust the idea that he's going to be healthy. He sat out a little bit of spring. He seems to be headed in the right direction just from a health standpoint going into the season. They feel like he's going to be a starter at one of the positions. And then Jacoby Johnson's a guy that not a whole lot of people probably know, but I think that he's going to be a guy by the end of next season that you look at the Oklahoma defense, and he's certainly going to be one of those cornerbacks that I think people will be talking about a little bit more. So, yeah, and then the safety group, they're extremely excited about them. Peyton Bowen is a former 5-star kid. Robert Spools-Jennings is another guy that has been in the system for, I guess 3-4 years now. So it will be very important for them to be able to defend the pass, because you look at the Missouri game, it's a great example, getting beat down the field. And that's how it kind of sparked everything that happened in the final 2 minutes. So they're excited about the pass rush, and they should be a pretty good marriage here in Brent's 4th year.
Let's stick with, I guess, a little bit of what you just said. You've watched Oklahoma offenses, you've watched Oklahoma defenses near the end of games where you've said, they've got this. You've watched them where you've said to yourself, there's no way they're getting off the field. There's no way they're marching down the field, down 4 with 3.5 minutes left, and this thing is over. What is the state of your brain, of the Oklahoma fans' brain, when it comes to late, high leverage? If Oklahoma was losing a bunch of these games comfortably last year, if they're improving, that they're going to find themselves in 50-50 spots, on the road, at home, whatever. Where is your confidence that Brent Venables and this staff, obviously Ben Arbuckle is TBD, that just they're going to be prepared for this moment? They might lose, but they're prepared for it. What's the state of that?
Scary. I think because they weren't in a whole lot of those games a year ago.
Right, exactly.
They lost. I think that, the late game situations for Oklahoma, and particularly, they brought Austin Welch in, a kicker from Kennesaw State. They had a freshman, Liam Evans, battling for the job in spring. And that was one of the big takeaways going into the portal was they got to go get a kicker. And they got Tate Sandell from UTSA, really accurate guy, which I don't think anybody's going to have a problem with. But there is still a little bit of an unknown just in terms of, all right, when the lights are on, can you go make a 42-yarder to win a game in Tuscaloosa? Can you make a 42-yarder to win a game at Neyland? the thing about it is they're going to be in some tight games. If they're going to make this jump from where people think that they, should or what they were a year ago, you're going to be playing in tight ball games. So I guess we'll wait to find out, which is kind of scary to a certain extent, because I know that, one of the things that you could probably criticize Brent for in the first 3 years was in-game coaching, just in terms of the little things, timeouts and, bad penalties, things of that nature. So, it hasn't gone well. You would expect it to be a little bit better this season. And I think that, just having somebody like a Kevin Wilson coming back as an analyst, just having somebody that you can not necessarily just throw everything to, but just another ear or another voice in your head. It's not necessarily a bad thing in this case. And when they lost Matt Wells a year ago, he went up to Manhattan to help Chris Kleiman on the offensive side of the ball. I think they did lose something, and maybe that didn't play out, or you didn't see that actually on the scoreboard a year ago because of the games that they were in. They were getting their ass kicked. But at the same time, I think that there was something lost there, and it should be a pretty comfortable position for Brent and for this staff to be able to kind of build off of going into this season.
So you need the grown-ups in the room, but even more importantly, you need the kids in the room, and the best kids. What is, for lack of a better term, the state of the Oklahoma bag?
The what?
The state of the Oklahoma bag. What is the state of the bag? How far away are they? How much room do they need to grow by, if at all? What is the state of the Scrooge McDuck vault somewhere in the universe of Oklahoma football?
Got you. Let me look up oil prices real quick. It's good. I would say, compared to everybody else in college football, very, very good. Exception. You don't go out and get some of the guys that they did. You don't go out and get a John Mateer or a Jaydn if you have no money, right? But I think when you compare it to Ohio State or you compare it to Texas, obviously, they don't have the type of money that you can just say or call somebody up and say, hey, we need $5 million wired over by the end of Friday. And somebody says, no problem, we'll take care of it.
Sure, of course.
So
Ty Hildenbrand money.
That's right.
Right. To get where Oklahoma wants to be, though, as a program, and where the fan base thinks that they should be in that upper echelon of college football, you could say that it needs to improve. But, I think that for so long, here over the last couple of years, I wouldn't say for so long, but over the last couple of years, particularly in Brent's era where they've thrown out some 6 and 7s, the Oklahoma is broke, candor or chatter out on social media. It's out there so much that I think that there are some people that think that Oklahoma is broke. I don't think that's the case. Right. But do they have the money like a Texas, or do they have the money like an LSU even? That it sounds like, I know that what they put together like $10 million in the spring portal. I don't think that that's the case, but I do think that they have positioned themselves well. And if you start winning and you take those steps, it's kind of crazy how when you win football games around here, where all of a sudden money starts showing up, checks start showing up in the mail.
I was going to say, how is the organization behind the scenes, right? Because you see a lot of the conflicting reports, and there's multiple collectives. Obviously, things are becoming more official now with the House settlement. Is everything buttoned up in the way it should be in terms of who's making those calls? What's the goal? How's the communication? What's the state of the business of the bag?
Yeah, Oklahoma's collective, One Oklahoma, has, they've kind of, I guess for the most part, emerged. They're the Oklahoma collective. And I think that they've had some pretty good leadership over there. It seems like everybody's on the same page. I know that, not to say that Oklahoma and Jim Nagy and the front office have been just completely involved in it, but I do think there's good communication in what they're wanting to be able to do. I do think that Oklahoma, for a long time, from an administrative standpoint, under Joe Castiglione, they've been waiting for the House settlement and for everything to kind of become official. And that way they've been kind of ramping up their efforts to meet whatever is to come with the court case. So, I would say it's good. Yeah. I would say that it's moving in the right direction. But I think just like anything else right now, as things turn and as things change, it seems from day to day or from month to month, you got to keep up with the Joneses. And there's still going to be schools out there that are finding ways to cut corners. And that's just not really an athletic department that Joe Castiglione has run, looking to be able to cut corners, which, I think as things kind of erupted a year ago on the football side is when, for the first time that I can remember since he was hired in 98, that people started looking around and saying, no, wait a second, what is Oklahoma doing from an athletic department standpoint? When you look at, the men's basketball program under Porter Moser, and they started going through the spells that they did in February, and are they going to miss the tournament again? So, Joe was definitely under some fire and definitely under the hot seat for, I think, the first time in a long time. And for a lot of people around here, that was, I guess, in a way, kind of tough to accept because they'd been so successful, not just on the football field, but in so many different areas of the department. So, if nothing else, I think it definitely woke some people up and, kind of was, you either got to adjust and get up with the times and kind of change how you're doing things, or maybe you're going to be looking for a job.
Fair enough. You just got back from Mexico. Final question. How was Mexico? How is Mexico? How was your time in Mexico? What was the best thing you ate in Mexico? Are you recovered from a small, entertaining wedding?
Not recovered. I'd come to the just kind of depressing realization that 4 or 5 days out of the country, poolside, drinking cervezas all day, as fun as it sounds, it takes a toll on this body these days. So
sure.
It was a great time. They had a couple of really good restaurants within the resort that we stayed at. Had a steak one night that was pretty good. I know that's not Mexican, but I thought it was excellent with a glass of wine. And it was just a lot of fun. And, it's something that we were kind of joking about. I don't really take a whole lot of vacations because everything kind of blends together from football to basketball to baseball. And then all of a sudden we're headed back down to SEC Media Day. But it was fun to get away for a couple of days. There was a lot of happenings on the business side with On3 and Rivals. So I'm
sure
playing Mayakoba on Wednesday as everything goes down. It's like, well, of course, I'm out on a golf course right now while everybody's wondering about this massive transaction in college sports. But it was good to get away for a couple of days. Now it's full throttle into the summer. We got a couple of like high school football big around here, obviously. So
sure.
They start up here in a couple of weeks. Texas already started up. And before you know it, we're going to be headed down to Atlanta for SEC Media Days, which I love how the SEC does everything because it kind of seems like the NFL in a way where there's something every couple weeks throughout the summer. And it kind of blends together what is normally, I don't want to say boring by any means. I'm a big baseball guy, so baseball and golf, but it kind of blends everything together. And, the main passion around here, definitely football, and ready to get the 2025 season going.
Can't wait. Eddie Radosevich, obviously, Soonerscoop.com. I'm almost positive I pronounced that correctly.
You guys killed it. Absolutely.
I love that so much.
I watched before we had you on last time, Eddie. This is God's honest truth. I went around to every podcast I could find you on. Video clips that weren't podcasts because I have such a terrible track record for butchering names that I wanted to get it right. So,
I'm terrible. I'm terrible at it. And I'm terrible at it to a point where now it's kind of a thing that I do. I'm so bad at it that I don't even try anymore. And when you grow up with the name Radosevich, like it's been butchered so many times that just kind of used to it. But I appreciate it. I know my mom and dad will be really happy.
Yeah, everybody's going to, at tailgates, around campus, everybody's going to know it because we're hammering it home. Eddie, thank you very much for your time. Can't wait to see how OU looks this year.
All right, there we go, Dan. Oklahoma with Eddie Radosevich over at Soonerscoop.com. Always good to touch base with him.
Yes.
Talked a little golf before we hit the record button, which is always nice for me. Didn't have any tennis speak for you, but
okay.
You just had Bill Connelly on him, assuming there was a little bit of that going on before you hit record.
Oh, well, Bill and I, we text all the time. We have very esoteric texting tennis conversations that it's just too boring and specific for the solid verbal. But if there's interest, happy to do it on Patreon. Happy to bring Bill on to talk Marta Kostiuk, whatever. So, okay, Oklahoma football, tie.
Yeah.
I cannot stress enough, and this was mentioned in a question to him, how strange it is to tune in to an Oklahoma football game, whether it's Lincoln Riley, whether it's Bob Stoops, whether it's Brent Venables, whether it's whoever. Bob Stoops coming out of retirement to briefly coach an Alabama Bowl. Like, to watch an offensive roster, be it besieged by injuries, be it besieged by guys just not working out as well as planned and anticipated, to not have full-on dudes at offensive skill position after the run of what felt like endless years of guy after guy after guy, Samaje Perine, Hollywood Brown, whatever, that it was, you remember, like, I mean, every coach has done this where Kenny Dillingham's like, we need a kicker, we're doing open tryouts on the field. It felt like they needed that for a slot receiver at times, for a tight end.
They're so banged up, right?
Right. It's so banged up. It's, it's just guys not working out and missing stretches of time. It's just like those rooms were so deep before that they could weather injuries. And it's been very strange to watch an Oklahoma team that's just like, oh, yeah. The defense we can count on. You're like, Oklahoma? Yeah. No, the defense is fine. That's not the issue. Like, okay. So dealing with bizarro Oklahoma these past couple years has been different for me. And I'm excited about the possibility of balanced Oklahoma. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about that possibility. I'm also a little bit skeptical too, because as we mentioned, I mean, schedule's still brutal. It's not an easy schedule by any stretch.
Right.
And though I think Eddie's right to point out that vibes are high right now. Vibes are good. Vibes are strong because they brought in particular, this three-headed monster of John Mateer, Ben Arbuckle, his coordinator, and now most recently Jaydn, who comes over from Cal, to kind of give them a little bit more pop at quarterback and running back. Certainly, that is reason to be excited. But you did hear what Eddie said when I asked him the question about the pie chart.
Yeah.
There were a lot of slices on that pie, Dan. So I don't know if you can just jump to the conclusion that adding a few pieces here and there is going to be enough to kind of override the other stuff that was wrong last season. Now, I happen to also like Brent Venables a lot. And I do think we have seen an evolution in his coaching style and the way that he's conducting himself, if only by going out and getting a GM to help kind of organize all this stuff behind the scenes. I do think, to answer my own question, he is getting better. He's just a first-time head coach. I think it's taken a little bit of time. We got to give him the grace to kind of figure this thing out as he goes along. But I also don't want to jump too far to conclusions and say that, well, just because there are bigger names coming in that everybody's excited about, we can just necessarily assume they're going to be better. It's the SEC. I don't know if we can make that assumption.
No. And I think there should be a lot of optimism around John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle. Here's a quick reading, Ty, a quick polite reading of Washington State's opponents' defensive SP plus from 2024. So they played two legitimately decent defenses in Washington and Boise State. Boise State, a tough playoff team. Boise State gave Oregon all it could handle. Otherwise, of the FBS teams, 92, 90, 78, 88, 106, 130, 132, 110, and 100. There's a lot of red. And so I'm not saying, and these are numbers that are opponent adjusted, that, Wazoo finished like 9th in the nation in offensive points per drive. It's going to be a little different this year.
It's going to be different. And look, I mean, we didn't, I don't think, talk a whole lot about the line. I mentioned it at some point. It came up here and there, but it's great to add pieces behind the line. But if the line doesn't improve, the line never really meshed to the point that I think we expected last year. I think we think highly of Bill Beanbaugh, the coach.
Yeah.
But we just did not see kind of the lift along the line that we expected in the preseason. And I don't know. I'm just going to take more of a wait and see approach. I am excited. We're still, living in a material world here and all. I'm going to name the episode that, by the way. But,
oh, great.
All things kind of laid out on the table. That's sort of my biggest point of skepticism with Oklahoma. There was a lot that was wrong, and it just seems like a lot in one off season to fix all of it, and especially knowing that you've got so many pressure points on this SEC schedule. I don't know. I'll steal your word. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Very fascinating to see which direction this all heads.
That's all I have.
Look, check out Eddie Radosevich over at Soonerscoop.com. We always appreciate his insight and, of course, his time. Check him out. Hear what he has to say. Follow him throughout the course of the season. Make sure you hit follow, hit subscribe here so that you don't miss any of our episodes. We've been jumping around a little bit here in the offseason, doing all sorts of different episodes.
It's fine. Keep people on their toes.
Talking about teams, talking about national stories. I think next week is the week for Shark Tank.
Ooh.
I think we're bringing Sark Tank back. Sark Tank 2.0. We did it 2 years ago.
Was it a May show that we did? I don't remember what month we did. It was later in the summer.
Yeah, it was late May, early June that we did Sark Tank. So
okay, great.
I've started putting that together. It's going to be bigger and better than it was the last time. I think I've got a little stronger of a concept for what this episode's going to be this time around. So more to come on that front. Hit follow, hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of our episodes.
Which mediocre impression did I do? Was it Paul Christ? Hey, Sharks.
I think it was Paul Christ.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it was Paul Christ.
All right.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
And of course, forballers.com is Patreon if you want to further support what Dan and I do. In the meantime, though, we appreciate everybody's undying support. Thanks for hanging with us here in the off season. We'll be back next week. Enjoy your weekend. As always, stay solid.
Peace.